Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Wyatt Claypool Show. With so much attention on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing that he intends to resign sometime in March after the Liberal Party elects a new leader, I think there has been one political figure that has escaped a lot of the attention, and that is federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Why are we even at this point? Why is the Liberal government still even around when there has been enough power in the opposition in order to get rid of them? Jagmeet Singh now is saying that the Liberals don't deserve to be reelected and they're not competent and that Justin Trudeau is not fit to be prime minister. But when did this all change? More of this needs to be asked. And to answer some of these questions, hopefully, I am bringing in a former NDP staffer, Julien Newman, to give us his insights. Julien, you know some people inside the NDP still, and you have been doing a little bit of poking around to see what's going on. And I'd love to hear your perspective on what's going on with Jagmeet Singh. Why is he even still the NDP leader?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So with all of this, with all the momentum, I guess now to get rid of Trudeau to call an election, where was the NDP even 6 months ago? And in your perspective, from your perspective, has anything even changed that makes it okay now to call for an election, but not okay 6 months ago?
Well, I'll start just by telling you, I got together with a group of some of the most prominent New Democrats. I mean, former staffers, former members of parliament, and we were trying to pressure the current alleged leader of the party um, to trigger an election in December, and specifically because we were afraid Donald Trump would come and do exactly what is happening right now. Um, and you know, more to the point, we got 1,000 NDP members and voters to sign a petition explicitly saying this. It was covered in the Toronto Sun, saying, "Hey, Jagmeet, you should be afraid of Trump more than Poilievre." And I mean, obviously, they didn't choose to go down the path that we wanted, which was to trigger an election when we had the opportunity. And I mean, who knows what's going to happen now? Like it's a very perilous time.
Well, and I, as a conservative, who obviously I don't vote NDP, I've never voted NDP. I've looked at the situation just from the perspective of if I was a political advisor, what would I be telling Jagmeet Singh to do? Even if in real life I wouldn't want that job, if I was, what would I do? I often do that on my show. What would I be telling Trudeau to do? What would I be telling Polyev or Singh to do? If I was an advisor to the NDP right now, I'd be saying that if you want any credibility going into the next election, you can't be seen as the guy who finally, when everyone is yelling at you to get rid of Trudeau, you finally do it. Because it's not, he doesn't have a hero narrative at all going into this next election. He, if anything, has come off like Justin Trudeau's executive assistant who's trying to prevent the hordes from coming in and removing Trudeau, but then finally giving way and pretending like that is him taking a principled stance. Like, I guess what has been the feeling inside the party with many NDP members, because you get the feeling that maybe enough people in the NDP don't want Polyev to become the prime minister. They're okay with Trudeau, or is it really the opposite, where people are like, but at this point, Trudeau's doing such a bad job, you can't just keep kicking the election down the road.
Yes, I think there's a distinction to be made between the like 12 people who are NDP members of parliament now. Yeah, it's so pathetic. You know, when I worked there, we had 59 members of parliament in Quebec only. Now there are, a handful of folks. Anyways, the distinction to be made between, the, handful of people sitting around and, taking their government salaries in Ottawa and the NDP members and the NDP voters. So, if you work in Ottawa and you're a New Democrat, for some reason, they're completely obsessed with, hating Poilievre. Like this is their thing. Poilievre is the new Trump. Poilievre, blah, 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 blah. The NDP members don't think that way. The NDP members think, hey, what's the best thing for Canada? How can we make the lives of Canadians better? And it's a totally different starting point. So if you try to have a conversation with NDP members, which we did, they say like, oh yeah, it's really a problem that Donald Trump is threatening a trade war. definitely we need a government. Let's make that happen right now. If you talk to the handful of folks sitting in Ottawa and drawing a government salary, they're like, yeah, well, what about Polyev? So that's
That
just
that's
their
what
mindset.
That's what Charlie Angus's statement was the other day, that
Yeah.
he, even after Singh said, at this point, we are going to vote no confidence in the Liberal government, Charlie Angus comes out and says, well, as unfit as Justin Trudeau is for office, Pierre Poilievre would be worse. And it's like that, from a political perspective, if I was, again, an advisor, I'd like smack that guy. Like, what are you talking about? When everyone knows that the source of their problems right now is Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government, they don't want to hear a hypothetical about how you have seen into the future and that this guy's plans are worse, especially now that the NDP has, in fact, actually sided with the Conservatives on certain issues of government corruption or against the consumer carbon tax. You would think that this would be the perfect moment to say that, yes, the Conservatives might, you don't even have to say the Conservatives are more likely to win, but you can just say that right now the problems are such that the only responsible thing to do is remove them. But they're trying to play this 3D chess and they don't seem capable of it right now. I want to back up for a second and just talk about Singh before the last few months, when it's become clear that he should have been taking action. I think it was clear a year ago. But how has he survived two elections where the NDP have either lost seats or barely gained any back like they did in 2021? Because we saw Thomas Mulcair in 2015 get removed as the leader or step down, despite the fact that they still had a substantial amount of support in that 2015 election after obviously Leighton passed away and he took over.
Yeah, so I have to be careful. Like, it's hard for me to talk about anything from the Tom era because I worked there, or I worked for Tom, and I'm very close to him. So there's some things I can't really touch on. All the
That's perfectly
Jagmeet
fine.
stuff I can talk about because I just haven't been involved in it. But I think essentially Tom was taken out by people within the party who didn't support him in the leadership race and who didn't like him and who organized to take him out. And Jagmeet, nobody's gone together to get rid of him. And I think that's a like that says something really negative about the New Democratic Party, that we haven't been able to get our act together and just get rid of this guy. I mean, you say he's Justin Trudeau's assistant. It's like he's more like Justin Trudeau's intern, right? Like it's a disaster. And how is it that nobody in this party has gotten their act together to get a proper leader? I mean, it says a lot of bad things about the party, and
Well,
it says
I think
that
there used to
I include
be,
myself in that.
and I'll include, even though he's not federal NDP leader, I'll include John Horgan in this category. That although I wouldn't vote for them, I have at least I at least have a general respect for people like Jack Layton, John Horgan, and Tom Mulcair, because although I don't agree with their policy solutions, they actually seem to have like a focus on their working class base, and think they've lost that under Jagmeet Singh. He in fact comes across a lot like leaders before Jack Layton, of very sanctimonious social activists. And I think that maybe you can correct me if you disagree with this perspective, but the problem with the party is because it has been so obsessed with progressive social issues that the idea is, if you get rid of Jagmeet Singh now, it's not the party saying we need to go back to focusing on the economic issues that our base cares about. It's that it feels like, well, now it's a repudiation against the progressive issues that Jagmeet Singh wants to talk about. So if we get rid of him, then we're like betraying the party principles or whatever. So like, I wonder if there's kind of like this weird like ideological standoff where they feel like getting rid of Singh makes it look like they're betraying their principles, even though they know if they don't get rid of him, they might actually lose even more seats.
Yeah, to be honest, uh, there's a reason why I'm the spokesperson for our group, and it's because I moved Silicon Valley over 10 years ago, and I work as a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur, and I don't care. I'm not dependent on these people. I don't need them to like me for my job. Um, I have zero to do with them, and I don't care. Uh, Most of these people, whether they're existing staffers, former members of parliament, or whatever in the orbit, if they're on the outs with the NDP, they're on the outs and they can't get a job. And I think that's a really big part of the story here, which is like people, they need to be in the in group to keep their influence, keep their job, feed their kids, and they just can't do what's necessary because it's just not in their interest to do it.
So it's become a bit of a bubble with Singh as the leader that criticism isn't allowed, at least now, and especially around the Trudeau issue.
I think that's true in all political parties at all times, and it's the same thing with the Liberal MPs all like getting together to boot Trudeau out. They all felt that the tides were shifting, and they wanted to get the anti-Trudeau side was going to win, and they all went there because that was the best thing for their careers. And I think that's just a large part of the story in all these political games.
Well, and it reminds me of what Anthony Housefather said in December when he finally openly called for Justin Trudeau's resignation. And he says, well, back in like November, October, or I think it might have been September, but he was saying that I wanted Trudeau to step down then, but I just hadn't said anything about it. It's like, well, what use are you then? And that's the
Yeah.
problem is if Jagmeet Singh personally knew that we need a new election, a new government, and he didn't act on it, it's like, well, isn't that technically the quality of a leader to say the thing when it needs to be said rather than 4 or 5 months later? Because that's what and it's not like you were demanding or a group of the NDP like staff members or party insiders, they weren't demanding this. Like, they might have wanted this like a year ago. It's not like you guys were demanding it like a year and a half ago, and maybe it's not the right time. We haven't been able to fundraise enough since last election, and that's always an issue. You can't divorce political financing from the political process. You have to have enough money to fight the election. But you guys are asking for this in December, and if anything, you guys are also trying to sustain them from not losing everything they have. It's not like you're showing up and saying you have to do the principal thing even though it's going to hurt you. You're saying do the principal thing because it's going to sustain you. Because if you're going to run a new election, how do you run as the guy who only barely let Trudeau finally fall at the very near end? I don't even think, and you can give me your perspective on this. I don't actually think that Singh cares about his own pension. The man already is decently well off. He's only like in his 40s. He'd have to wait a long time before he even applies for what is a pretty small pension overall. But he's allowed people to think that that's what motivates him by acting so slowly. So he ends up being the kind of author of his own demise here in terms of his political credibility.
I think to the extent that, like the pension thing, like his personal interest, to the extent that comes in, I'm sure it's a small piece of it. And honestly, it came up all the time when I talked to people in the party. They're like, look, Jagmeet's not going to do this for February 25th. That's always what they would say.
Okay, that's actually,
I don't.
I have to quickly say that's actually shocking to me because I've been the one trying to give Jagmeet the benefit of the doubt for so long, thinking that I think he likes the celebrity of being the party leader, and if a new election happens, he might be out. But the fact that that man cares about his pension is somewhat shocking to me.
Well, I suspect it's not a huge factor. What I suspect is a bigger factor, and something you talked about in one of your videos, is he's going to lose his seat.
But
And
he's been cut in half in redistributions, and I think the best he can hope for is a riding where 338 gives him a 50-50 shot. And 338 would, in fact, be probably more favorable to him than he deserved because they, in Cloverdale, Langley City, not that far away, assumed Tamara Jensen was going to win with a 26% margin, and she, in fact, won with a 50% margin.
yeah, well, that's what he's afraid of, to the extent he's afraid of something, which is essentially, right, like, what would obviously get him booted out as leader of the NDP? Losing his own seat. And the likelihood of him losing his seat, who knows? Elections, I mean, a lot, like, who would have predicted 6 months ago that Donald Trump would try to like take over Canada, right? Like, crazy things happen, and so who knows? But there's a probability that he loses his own seat, and if he loses his own seat, he loses everything, and he'll go back to like stocking shelves at Loblaws, which is where he deserves to be. But obviously, he doesn't want to be there.
Yeah. That would be, or I guess you could get a job at Metro. His brother does have a good inside lane with the Metro people with his lobby firm, and that's again been just a big thing with Singh. It's just all of the own goals with constantly making everything about Loblaws, and I find that over time he's been very one note in a way that Jack Layton or Thomas Mulcair never felt one note. It felt like a Canadian party leader where he feels like again an activist. And again, you could maybe give me an idea of what party strategy has been over time. But from what I've observed, it felt like they sort of left working class ridings and they've shifted focus more over to either very traditional union ridings that they've been winning for like the past 50 years and college campus ridings with a large student population. That seems like what they've limited themselves to, unless every single riding is going to get its own university. I don't think that that's going to give them a great way of being able to win in the future, because I don't think they can. And I assume you're from Quebec. That I don't think that they're going to ever be able to pull off that big Quebec seat win like they did back in 2011.
So my view of the world, and here it's just like a personal thing. This is honestly more from being a startup founder than being involved in politics. But my view of the world is I just assume everybody is a totally incompetent, totally lethargic, blob. And it's like almost everybody has no idea what they're doing. They suck. They have no energy, and their strategy makes no sense, and they're idiots. And then you have a handful of people who are capable of accomplishing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And usually that explains almost everything. So if you just like assume stupidity and incompetence, it explains how the Liberal Party of Canada kicked out their their only good member of parliament, Justin Trudeau, as their leader. I mean, he doesn't appeal to me. He appeals to a lot of Canadians. They're replacing him with Mark Carney, who's a banker from London. Like, that's totally crazy. And so why would they do that? It's because they're idiots, right?
And that's actually, I know you and I saying this because I actually agree with you fully on that. A lot of people are like, well, why wouldn't they get rid of Trudeau? He sucks. Everyone hates him. Yes, but really, do you want like somebody with as beige of a personality as Chrystia Freeland or Mark Carney or Francois Philippe Champagne as your new leader? All these people are Trudeau with less charisma, except they are convinced that somehow if they throw in Freeland, they're going to win like 75 seats and they're going to at least look okay after this next election. And I just don't even think that that's true.
Well, the Ottawa, I'll just say one thing on that. Yeah. The Ottawa chatting class, their kind of perspective, because they're all like old, right? Like they're all, in their 60s. They have a perspective from the 80s and 90s where like the Liberals were the, natural governing party of Canada. The Liberal Party is, their natural state is 23 members of parliament, which is where they were before Trudeau. And this, like the way people put it in Ottawa is like, the Liberal brand is stronger than the Justin brand. And it's like, no, the Justin brand is stronger than the Liberal brand. As weak as the Justin brand is now, it's better than the absolutely horrible kind of like,
you're right, because Liberals. They tried to run just on the generic Liberal brand in 2011 and in 2008 with Stefan Dion and then Michael Ignatieff. And then that didn't work, so they decided to fully soul suck the party by just having Justin Trudeau not only installed as a leader with barely any competition, but then also he was given dictatorial powers. They had to beg Trudeau to step down because there was no way for caucus or even the party board or members to get rid of him. And now they're going back to what they didn't even have with Michael Ignatieff, which was a brand. The thing is that they didn't realize before, Paul Martin had his own brand. Jean Chrétien had his own brand. It's almost like the social credit party we're watching, because unless it's a good leader, nobody cares about them. And you're right. The problem with the Liberals, even more than the Conservatives and the NDP, when they get 20% of the vote, they get fewer seats than if the NDP got 20% or the Conservatives got 20%, because they are the party for absolutely no one outside of the island of Montreal. And even that doesn't look to be true anymore, because it's just thinly spread party for people who think that they're intellectual but don't actually care about policy outcomes. To get back to Jagmeet Singh here, are they, because you've maybe heard what they're thinking about now that all this information, the new liberal leadership race is happening, are they going to then use this as a way of delaying even further the next election, give the new prime minister some more time, come up with excuses or deals in order to try and extend this thing out as far as possible?
I think everybody in Ottawa, and this is the NDP, the Liberals, the Conservatives, the people in the media, they are so unaware of reality that they just figured out like yesterday that the threat from Donald Trump was a real thing, right? Like these guys, they have no plan. And like to the extent they had a plan, it all disappeared when they kind of like suddenly figured out that the United States was going to start a trade war against Canada, despite the fact that it was crystal clear a month ago. So I think the actual answer is, to the extent the NDP had a plan, 2 days ago, they have no plan now, and that's true for most of these political parties. Like they have no idea what they're doing because it's Donald Trump who's driving the ship.
Yeah, fair enough. And what do you from what you've heard, not you might have heard nothing so far, but what's the does the NDP have any real electoral strategy for this next year, or is it kind of like they're making it up as they go at this point?
I think they're trying to like reboot themselves and reboot Jagmeet. Like that's the whole thing. But nobody cares. Like, honestly, we did this small media campaign. It was like me and my executive assistant. We spent like 2 days, and we got more attention than the NDP has gotten in like 6 months. So like these people, they're not good.
You're actually so right. And this is even the Conservative Party many a time. In fact, people don't know this. When Poilievre ran for Conservative leadership, he specifically refused to hire any party comms people because they suck at their jobs. Party comms people are the worst part of the consultant class, in the sense that they think if we just keep repeating something, it will become true. If you've ever worked with a terrible marketing team where he's like, we just have to say that Jagmeet's the working class hero and it will happen. It's like, no, you actually need to work on that perception. You, like the way that Jack Layton did for like 2 decades, had to work on the idea that he was like an actual working class guy. Whereas Jagmeet Singh, they keep kind of coming out every few months and trying to wish cast him as like a different type of politician that he's not. Like he's the kind of guy, frankly, from my perspective, who was streaming with Hassan Piker and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar. That's who Jagmeet Singh always kind of is burned into my head. He's what I always say is like a parrot looking for shiny objects. He likes the attention, but I find, even though he's part of the NDP, the traditional working class party, whenever he's at like a picket line or strike, he always looks uncomfortable. And I think that he just doesn't know who he even is right now. And that's why when Trudeau leaves, although people are trying to say, well, the Conservatives have nothing to say because they were the anti-Trudeau party, that was actually true about the NDP. They don't know what to say because, in fact, they agree with a lot of the Liberal policies and helped them pass all of them over the past 2 years.
If you Google Jagmeet Singh, Jack Layton, I'm pretty sure you could pretty easily find there's like one photo that exists of Jagmeet Singh and Jack Layton together. It's kind of like some official photo that was taken. And if you look it up, you can see like Jack's face. His face kind of like, who is this loser? Right? And like that to me is like Jack's face in that photo, standing beside Jagmeet, is like a complete and very accurate summary of the guy. And it's like, why are you even here? It's kind of like everybody's reaction to him.
You prompted me to do this. I am now going to show that photo on screen because you actually are correct. It's this kind of like, okay,
Yeah,
well,
exactly. It's like, why am I here? And who is this guy? Right?
yeah.
Like, and that is not only Jack's reaction to Jagmeet, it's everybody's reaction to Jagmeet. And that's a problem the NDP has. And you know, I've spoken a lot of Quebec NDP MPs. I was like, why do you think we got totally destroyed in the election? You know, after we first swept the province, and I won't tell you specifically what they said, but like pretty much is like they'd go door to door, and people are like, I just hate this Jagmeet.
Mhm. And everyone wants to then pull the card that, well, it's because Quebec voters are particularly like racist or something like that, or intolerant. And it's like, have you ever been to Montreal? Have you ever been to Montreal suburbs? He could easily get elected there if he was a local, like Solidaire Party politician. But he has to be real. And the thing is that there is something about the idea that he can't take off the Rolex watch that's very telling. Because if I was his brand manager, I'd be like, you gotta like just remove the things that people are gonna make a joke about. It's not about saying, or at least lean into it. You can't be the guy who's going after Galen Weston for how much money he makes at the same time that you're making like a family's net income in a year on your body while you're asking it. It's just the imagistics are he puts himself before the policy so often. And that's exactly how you can explain the whole Trudeau situation right now. Singh was putting himself before the public interest and what was right on a policy level. And now he's shocked when the NDP, in fact, in the recent polls, are actually down. In
Yeah.
theory, this should be the best time to be the NDP, just like it was in 2011. When the Liberals are falling apart, you should be right there with a bucket to catch all the stuff that they're bleeding out. And so far, it's that he has made himself a very fussy type of a figure, the same way that Trudeau, in fact, is.
Yeah, I think there's a very bright future that you know, I foresee, and you know, I'm not really part of it because I'm not, you know, part of Canadian politics anymore, truly. But where we go the same route that the UK went, where it's like, you know, Jagmeet gets defeated, he leaves, a proper person comes in, and you know, we relegate the Liberal Party to what the Lib Dems are in the UK. And we have a two-party system in Canada that's the Conservatives have one opinion, the NDP have another perspective, and you know, you have a normal system. I actually think that's the most likely outcome if you know, fast forward 20 years. And I'm super bullish on the NDP. I think it has one of the best brands in terms of as a political party. You know, it has by far the worst leader, but you
I'd
know,
actually
the
agree with
Liberals are
you
going to
that
have a horrible leader soon.
I actually agree with that, even though again I would never vote NDP, that the NDP actually does have more of a brand than at least the Liberals do, in the sense that anyone could be the NDP leader and they'll still get 15 to 20% of the vote. Whereas if you have a bad Liberal leader, you will immediately fall to like 17%, like Michael
Yeah,
Ignatieff was at, even though it's a party that used to soar extremely high under people like John Chrétien just a little bit before. And that wasn't even the funny thing in 2011, that it wasn't even like the Liberals were in power and people turned on them. People turned on them just because they just frankly don't like them very much. But maybe a last question here. What's your prediction when it comes to election outcomes in 2025? Where do you see the NDP finishing in terms of the popular vote? Do they go up in seats? Do they go down? What's happening with them?
yeah. I think everyone's going to get wiped out except for the Bloc in Quebec and the Conservatives in Canada, and that's actually, if you zoom out, that is the story of Canadian politics for the last, you know, 30, 40 years, which is essentially like voters, their message is we hate you and we want to fire you. And every single time they have the chance to fire people, they do. And I think essentially what's going to happen is Canadians going to say, everyone who is in government right now, we hate them. We hate our government. We hate where the country's going. And we'd love it if the political class of Canada understood how unhappy we were. And the only way we can deliver that message is to vote, you know, Conservative in Canada, Bloc in Quebec. And, you know, the Canadian voters are going to continue to do the same thing over and over again until Canada's political class understands that, you know, everything's not rosy and people are not happy.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Julian. It's always good to hear honestly what like the insider perspective is in other parties, because oftentimes the only parties I hear from are conservative ones. So broadening my horizons is fantastic. Thanks for coming on the show. Everyone watching this, remember to like this video, subscribe, leave a comment if you found anything interesting, and I will be back in a future video at some point. I always do the worst outros. I'm sorry, people.